Risk management and disaster recovery concepts, lesson 14. So let's go ahead and get started with the risk management process. This is pretty much knowing the processes and what makes the business run. So anything that makes is mission critical or business critical, you need to be aware of that and be able to know what functions are there to make your business run every day. What makes the business have money revenue coming in, and what you want to do is you you identify those functions and then you identify the vulnerabilities that could come against those functions. Identify the threats as well, and what's the business impact if these things are carried out and you lose certain functions to those business critical assets. So the risk management process of this is just kind of getting an overview of what is the vital points of the business and how do we protect those type of things. So once you figure out what's critical to the business, what functions can you not live without for a certain amount of time before the company actually is in a disaster recovery type of mode. Um, you need to go into the mission essential functions, and that's the knowing the maximum tolerable downtime, the recovery objective time, and then the recovery point objective. So the maximum tolerable downtime is the maximum amount of time that you can go without this function before it becomes um, a critical asset and the company is about to go under if you don't get it back online. So if your whole business is dedicated off one or two servers and those servers are down, and then whenever people go to your website they can't get to it, then you need to know the maximum time that you can actually be down before it starts to affect the bottom line, the actual profit that's coming into the business. The recovery time objective is a period that a disaster or that an individual system can remain offline. Um, and the recovery point objective is the amount of data that can be sustained until you need to actually recover that data. So you want to kind of point that recovery data point back to the time where you actually went offline. So now that you're aware of what the company has that's critical to functioning every day, we need to make sure we keep an eye on the key performance indicators. That mean time between failures and mean time to repair is very important to know. It's a actual algorithm that goes into determining how much time can a certain server or a switch can be down, and how much time can we actually lose by having it out of play. But these are things that you definitely want to, when you see those abbreviations, because on the exam they're not gonna spell these out for you. They're actually just gonna use the abbreviations here. Just know which ones are till failure, and then the mean time between the failures, and then the actual mean time to actually it breaking and then having it repaired with mean time to repair. Now, going into risk assessment and business analysis, this is where you break down the actual risk and how do you actually calculate it. And you want to make sure that you understand likelihood. What is that likelihood of the vulnerability actually happening to us? Do we actually have the threats um, to make us vulnerable and create that type of risk? And then what's the impact if it does happen to us? Are we losing out? Will we lose customers? Will our name be tarnished? Um, will we lose revenue? Will we be able to recover from this? And that's the impact of a vulnerability or actually accepting a risk. And then you have the business impact analysis, which is the process of assessing the losses that may occur in each scenario. So on page 586, we're going to talk about the two methods that are used to assess the likelihood and the risk. likelihood and risk, which is quantitative and qualitative. The easiest way that I remember how to tell these two apart is quantitative will deal with more numbers, factors involved. So, the price of something, the amount that it's actually going to cost, where qualitative is more of a qualitative assessment. So, in quantitative, we're talking about the single loss expectancy. If we have a router that goes down, what's the single loss of that it cost us? How much was that router worth? And then that's normally added up to be your single loss expectancy. But then, if you don't replace that router, or if a server goes down and you're not able to have that back up, what is the annual loss expectancy over a time period, over a years, um, factored into that loss of that system? Then, like I alluded to before, qualitative is more of a qualitative type of approach to the risk factors. So they seek out to see what's people opinions of the risk factors. This is where you can kind of reach out to those um, those people who've been with the business the longest, see how they would actually gauge the risk, and then make your assumptions off of that. So now that you have your business analysis in place, and you know what is critical to the business, and then you know your likelihood and your risk that stands between you and the vulnerabilities, then you need to have a risk response, and those risk response could differ um, to any types of different ways. So I'm gonna go through the ways I have them listed out here. You got risk mitigation, risk deterrence, avoidance, transference, or acceptance. So starting back off with risk mitigation, this is where you see the risk, and we're gonna put some kind of tool in place to mitigate the actual impact of the risk. So think about your antivirus, where we can't stop all the viruses that are out there, but we can put this tool in place to lessen the blow if we were to be attacked by a virus. Risk deterrence is kind of like a block, or a to actually deter someone from actually attacking. So a simple way of thinking that about that is just kind of like having a fence around your building, but then having barbed wire around the fence at the top. So it lets you know that, hey, you can still come in over the fence, that's fine, but you're gonna have a tough time climbing over the barbed wire that's at the top. Then you have avoidance, where this is kind of like where we see the risk and the risk is too high, so we're gonna avoid moving in that direction altogether. If the risk is too high, and the only way we thought about going into that direction of let's say this new business venture, but if it's too high, then we might want to avoid that venture altogether, and therefore avoiding the risk. And then you have risk transfer. So risk transfer is kind of like accepting the risk, but if any damage is done, you can fall back on another company. So think about it as in insurance. So you have technical insurance, where um, if any kind of damage comes to you, or not to you, but to your equipment, then you can fall back onto an insurance company to replace the equipment. Now, it won't necessarily replace the data that you may have lost on your equipment, but they will be able, if you got a flood, then the risk was the flood, it flooded your data center, you can fall back on the insurance company to pay back for that new data center that you're going to get. And then you have acceptance, and that's pretty much you know cut and dry. You know that the risk exists, and you know that you're willing to accept the risk, and that's also kind of going into your risk appetite. So your risk appetite will gauge how much you're willing to accept. Okay. So risk registers and change management. A risk register is a document showing the results of the risk assessment. Um, Going on to change management. Change management is a process that we use. I know that we use in our business to actually make changes to configurations, servers, any type of um, any type of major change to the system, to the network. You want to have a change management ticket put in. But it is a overall system for everyone to know that, hey, um, this server may be offline for a certain amount of time. These agents may be offline for a certain amount of time. So it causes you to be proactive rather than reactive. Whenever you're becoming reactive to a problem, then you're reacting to an issue, which kind of puts you behind a little bit because you have to play catch up of why did it have this problem instead of being proactive where um, if we plan to do, let's say, an upgrade, then we can see if that upgrade is going to bring on problems. And a change management system can put in a good stipular to um, letting everybody know what's going on with the changes going on within the network. Um, you need to know about the request for change. This is kind of like a formal way of asking or to submit a change to the network or to a system. So keep that in mind. And these change management normally has kind of like a change advisory board. So that'll be your higher ups, your C level. Well, I wouldn't say C level, but I would say higher ups, your managers of different departments to know what changes are happening. Because what happens in one department, another department may say, oh, okay, well, if you make that change, then that's going to affect what we are doing over here. And sometimes it just gives you a better overview, a better scope of what's going on in the network. So on page 593, we started to go into resiliency and automation strategies. So this is kind of stepping into the disaster recovery a little bit, but it's more on staying up to par, making sure that we can have, our business, our critical business functions always running at a an available rate. Going back to the CIA, always having that availability there. So it started off talking about continuity operation plans, also known as a business continuity plan. So this is just basically a plan that shows these are our critical functions for our business. This is what makes us run. These are the scenarios that we think could hinder us the most. These are the plans and the actions we need to put in place in order to keep these things um, small as possible to not happen. So that business continuity plan is very important on having a day-to-day activities go on without any hindrance. Um, Going into high availability, that's kind of like when we were talking about server clustering and having load balancers going from one server to the next, having that if you can't get to this server, if you can't get to this functionality, you always have this functionality. You can always have to go to this server and have that same functionality over there. So having that high availability is key. Fault tolerance is still going off of that high availability concept where fault tolerance and redundancy, what they do is you want to have an outlook of what could happen and then plan for it and actually have you know um, safety nets in place just in case servers go down, um, power outages go out, um, and in case of power outages, you have things like ups. A They're pretty much ups is something that you could put on your computer, servers, printers. Uh, they're pretty much these big black boxes that sit under the desk. And what instead of you plugging your computer into the wall, you plug it into the ups. The ups then goes into the wall, and what it does is just basically has a battery within that black box. And whenever power is cut to that building, then that ups automatically switches on, and it keeps up the system until power is able to be restored. Um, a lot of times, it is created to last. several hours before dying out. So it's always good to have these things on just in case you have power outages or power surges to actually cut that power. Um, uh, that section also talked about redundant components and network cards and drives and cooling fans on your servers. You have different drives that you want to have, multiple drives on them. And just in case any one of those goes bad, then you could pull one out and still run off the other five, let's say, and then, replace the one that's bad and then keep it moving in that regards. Also with cooling fans, you have one or two cooling fans on it to where if one has a problem, then you're able to fall back to the next, and that gives you time to replace the one that's having a malfunction. So elasticity and scalability. Um, Scalability is just taking those servers. Like I think I referenced this in the cloud section, where you can scale out or you can scale up. So in order to have a scalability, you either scale out to have more people join more in a cloud setting. So you scale out, you add more servers and more servers and more servers, and you add this way. Whereas scaling up will be adding more RAM, more hard drive space. Um, which is good too, but you constantly have to add based off of the traffic that you have. So scalability is just being able to have the resources for everyone to actually come and get. Now elasticity, remember, is just kind of like a on demand real time. Um, you know, you ask for more. Hard drive space, it is instantly given to you. There's no turning off a server, opening the casing, and then adding a new hard drive, or if you wanted RAM, there's no breaking down the server and actually adding more RAM. So that elasticity is kind of almost real time, especially in the cloud settings. So staying in the topic of redundancy, we want to talk about drive arrays. Um, in particular RAID. RAID is a system to where we have multiple disks all writing data, but if one disk is able to be removed or fail, then the data is not lost. Is still being recorded in a type of way. However, they have the redundancy and the fault tolerancy set up. So it's important to know each level and how they differ from each other, and then how many disks are required for each level. So we talked about load balancing on a application and a server standpoint, but we also want load balancing when it comes to the network. We also want different ways if our network goes down or if our ISP, our internet service provider, has an outage for that day. We don't want to be kind of just waiting for them to come back up with a connection. We want to have different types of fault tolerance for that. So I knew in one of the banks that I worked for, they had a whole different ISP for the internet connection. So if company A was to ever go down, they could switch over real quick and have company B be a backup. Now the internet speed was much slower with them, but it was a connection to where yeah, again, you didn't have to go into being down or having that downtime and losing business that way. So just keep in mind that not only do we want load balancing in our applications, we want load balancing on our networks as well. So when talking about non-persistent, I want you guys to remember non-persistent and VDIs, um, virtual desktop interfaces. I want you to associate those two. Um, they're more likely going to be asking questions that have to do with some type of virtualization and how can we go back to a known good state, or how can we just not lose any data, just kind of wipe the slate clean. And that's non-persistent. Non-persistent is just you know we're working on something on an application or we're working on an OS, but we don't need data to be saved to the next day or the next week. It can be easily discarded and then start anew at a known good factor baseline. So going back to what we said with the a hardening configuration is that when you set that baseline for a hardening standards, then for a VM that you can set your VDI up to have that baseline of all the standards. And then when you don't need that VM anymore, you can just kind of reset it back to that known good configuration at the beginning. So going into recovery sites is we're pretty much dead into disaster recovery. So this is going to be your alternate data center or your alternate work site or some type of site to where you can set it up to keep continuity going if you need to implement a disaster recovery plan. So um, three things to remember when it comes to recovery sites. You want a hot site, a cold site, and a warm site. So with a hot site, this is a one for one trade off. This site is set up to be similar to your everyday workspace. It has all the servers in place. It has all the data links. All your network configurations have been set up. Only thing it needs is to be switched over, quote unquote, switched over, and then turned on to be live. So it's a one for one swap. Um, a lot of big companies have these hot sites. Um, so you're looking for that 99.9% of availability, you're probably going to have a hot site somewhere set up just in case a disaster comes and you have to switch over real quick. So now a cold site is just the total opposite of that. A cold site may be just a building with internet connection, but it's nothing there to have the connection for your actual business to run and to be functional. So you're looking, if you have to implement a disaster recovery plan, you're probably looking for, you know, 3 to 5 days of being out of service and then set up that cold site in order to be a functioning site. And then, of course, if we said those two polar opposites, then a warm site has to be right there in the middle. It has some things, so it has some things that are critical, but it doesn't have all the nuances to make working enjoyable, I guess, or convenient. So it would have your major, let's say your major functions for the business to run, but it won't have Microsoft Outlook waiting for anybody to just come in and check their email. Where on a hot site could be an alternate place for somebody to actually go and work, and you would never know that they were at the alternate site. But a warm site may have an email server, the physical server ready and racked and have the connections, but it's not configured. It's not actually pulling down the real time data from the prod side or the production side into it to actually have that if it's ready to go, then it's ready to go. It's normally a day or two out of reach. So you need to take like a day or two just to kind of set the configurations up, and then you'll have a completely alternate data center. Now, in conjunction to the hot, cold, and warm sites, we want to go over the where do we want to put these at in geographical areas. So, where in the world, or where in the states, or what country do we want to have our data center located at? Kind of, sidetracking a little bit. This is why the cloud is such a good um, commodity. It's the cloud is everywhere. The cloud could be um, in Japan as well as in Brazil. It could be in Iowa. It could be in North Carolina. Um, and when I say the cloud, I mean data centers that host your data and host your application, host your 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 things that you need to have a everyday working ability. So a lot of companies right now are kind of considering the cloud to be their alternate data center rather than buying a whole building and then setting that building up to be a hot site, a warm site, or a cold site. So, but to go back to this slide, we're talking about the location selection. So, you want your for you want your physical building that's going to be an alternate data center to not be in the same location or the same vicinity as your regular data center. It defeats the purpose. I don't know. I think we alluded it to a couple of weeks ago, where we said if a hurricane comes and it hits the whole east coast of South Carolina, and your data center is in the same city as your actual data center, then you defeated the purpose of having a backup. Both buildings could be out of power, could be flooded, or have damage to it, and then you defeated the purpose of actually setting up a site and having connections roll over to that alternate site. So you want to kind of keep it a state apart if you're going to stay in the United States, or you want to put it on the West Coast, or you want to put it up north if you're down south, or vice versa. And you just want to keep those miles away, because while it may be an ice storm in New York, it may be nice and sunny down in Miami, and that's where your alternate data center is. And therefore, while we can't connect, let's say through New York, we can bypass and make sure that we make connections to Miami and then get our data out that way. But again, going back to the cloud, that's why the cloud is such a way to go, is because it is not limited by that. And then it's immediate, it's pay as you go, is everything that you want in a data center, but it doesn't have any kind of limitations on it as far as physicality being. So that's in a nutshell location selection. But then you want, how far is too far. When you talking about having it in, let's say you got your data center here in Colombia, and then you have your alternate data center in Ireland, and Ireland is a whole day ahead of you. And does it make sense for you to transfer data that you made today to a data center that's ahead of you 12 hours? So just keep those things in mind. Replication factors of actually how much traffic is too much traffic to send across the network. Do you have enough networking infrastructure in order to hold that type of data across, in order to supply your alternate data center with the data, so if you ever need to recall it or you ever need to use it at that point in time, that you'll have everything that's up to date and you're not 2 weeks out. Now, in the last slide, you heard me say retention or replication. I'm sorry. Replication is backing up data. And we want to talk here about backing up that data, but more importantly, the retention of the data. How long do you want to keep the files that you're getting? Um, on the Security Plus exam, you're going to see 9 times out of 10, you're going to see questions that are geared towards how long you keep information, more so than how short you keep the information. Now, it's important to know both of them, and to know how long you need to actually hold on to things. But um, you can get in trouble for getting rid of information too quickly, but is more prevalent when you are supposed to be knowledgeable, that you're supposed to hold on to it for so many years after you obtain it. And so just keep that in mind when it comes to retention. And the retention policy is knowing how long do you need to keep this information, this data that you're creating every day, or that you get in from other sources. How long are you supposed to keep that? Also, is it supposed to be in a certain area? Can it not leave the United States? Do you have customers in China that cannot share that information, but they have with you, and now you have their information here in the United States? All those things fall under the retention policy, and just know the important part about it is just how long and how short can we hold on to data? So backup types on page 604. I want you guys to take a look at this table, learn the types of backups that we have in the industry. And learn if one of these types are ran, what information is left behind, and then when is it important to run the next backup in the same week. Um, Once you start to go through this table, you'll understand what I just said more thoroughly. Um, you will get, I will guarantee you will see this on the exam. Please go through, learn each type, and then what is left over after each one is ran. All right. So snapshots in this shadow copy service. Whenever you see these two things, just know that this is kind of like a freezing time on data, and that it could be used to go back to, kind of like when I was saying about the VMs and having that known good state. Snapshots are kind of that, but it's not necessarily a known good state. It's just a state in time where a snapshot, a capture was taken of the settings, the configurations, and we can roll back to that. Just keep that in mind whenever you see snapshots or volume shadow copy services. Going into disaster recovery exercises, so you're mainly to have two uh, disaster recovery exercises. Either you have a tabletop or a field scale exercise. So a lot of companies that I've been with, we have tabletop exercises where we will act out if as if everyone is in a disaster, whether it was man-made disaster, some type of DOS attack is going on against the company, and we have to be forced into a disaster recovery, or if it's an act of God, tornado hit the building, or a flood happened, or you get snowed out and then icicles cause a power outage. So we would go into these scenarios, and then everyone will sit and give their impressions on what they need to do in order to, one, keep the business running, two, in order to do their job for the day. And those talking out those strategies is a good way of having to see where you need to bolster your continuity plan and what tools you may need in place just in case the worst happens. Now, on the other hand, with a full scale exercise, you're actually acting out. So I had one company, we actually cut the power to our production network. So now everything had to fall over to the secondary company, and then we had to make sure that the configurations were correct in order to carry on with business just that day. But it's a full size exercise. It's a full scale exercise that we're actually practicing, hands on. Everybody's making sure that we can clear checks, that we can still take customers at on a normal business day. So that's a good way of acting out a disaster recovery plan as well. Um, After each one, though, we have a after action report. So it's a basic report of saying what have we learned, what could we do better, um, what can we implement here that caused us, this pain point here. So if we have pain points, if we have any kind of hiccups or roadblocks, then that after action report can be there to give us more guidance for the next time we have this exercise, or if we need to actually implement. So moving on to page 611, we're starting to talk about forensics and having gathering evidence for the court of law. It first starts off talking about forensics and how it's the practice of collecting evidence from the computer. And this is true within the informational security realm. They also went over due process and legal hold, but with legal hold and e-discovery, it's important to know that the data that is subject for uh, court usage, it needs to be held um, on a certain drive or whatever they deem to be the drive to have that data on, and then it needs to be in a such format that it can be used in a trial. Um, Anything other than that can have that evidence thrown out. So if you are ever put in a position to collect data for evidence for a court case, it's important to know the order of volatility. And this means that, as we do work on our machines, computer is constantly taking information and then storing it in kind of a memory set and just keeping a backup, a short backup of it. And, if power were to be cut from it, um, you can definitely get that information back, but you need to go in a certain order to know where it goes at. So this order here um, will show from top to bottom which is going to delete the, let's say, the data first. I want to say cache, but um, cache is something of its own. So I want to say it has the memory of it. It loses the memory first from the CPU and registers in the cache memory, and then it goes on to the routing table, uh, the ARP cache, and kernel statistics. All of those are next. They don't hold them as long, and I'm all talking about if the power is cut from the machine. Then you want to check your RAM to see if your information is there. Um, then going on to temporary file systems. Now, once you get into the temporary files in the disk, you know the RAM or the memory there stays longer, so it's able to store itself there and take a power outage and able to show you that same amount of data the next time it's actually booted up. So going from top to bottom, you want to make sure that you check the top ones first. And if all in all cases, in certain scenarios, if you don't have to cut the power to it, don't cut the power to it. Make sure that you get the evidence that you need from the top, and then you can work your way down to the bottom. Going again with the time offset. So remember that all of these systems are still running off a synchronized timeline. And if you're ever doing some type of forensics and we're looking for things, when were they done and how were they done, then 9 times out of 10 we need to go and check our network logs and to see if they're there, because a lot of hackers, what they a known tactic to do is to take away those logs and delete them and kind of erase that from the memory of the machine. And just you want to make sure that we are always on time with every other system. So the last thing we got is the system image capture. And the main thing what you want to know about this is that we're going to take something called a write blocker, and we're going to hook it up to our hard drive. So let me stop there. Let me kind of rewind back. So let's say if they come to you and they say, hey, we caught so and so doing um, transferring money that they shouldn't have transferred, but we can't prove for real that it happened. So we need for you to go and look at the logs, look at data transfers to make sure that this happened. And so what you want to do, instead of taking the actual machine or his laptop or her laptop or whatever and then going into it and then taking your mouse and moving files over, what you want to do is you want to set that off to the side and you want to get what you call a write blocker. Hook your write blocker up to that laptop or that hard drive that's in that computer, and then you want to take a system image capture of that actual hard drive. And what that does is it creates a bit for bit um, image of what the actual machine is. So you can have a copy sitting on your own machine, and then you can go through and look at the different files that were open, websites that they browse, and you can do that without interrupting that that original system. Because what'll happen is that if it goes into the court of law and they can prove that you opened something by mistake, looking for something or looking for that forensics or doing forensics on the machine, then they can end up throwing that whole machine out because it's been tampered with. So that's why we use system captures, and that's why we use write blockers to avoid that. So just keep that in mind when it comes to running forensics. You want to actually get a image capture, and you want to get what is called a write blocker, so it prevents you from writing anything over to that machine.